Well, Stephanie, welcome to the show and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I was really looking forward to this today.
Yes, me too, because I have to tell you, the topic you cover and the idea of aging has been something that we have been hearing She Speaks members talk about for a while. But for some reason, COVID seems to have almost intensified this feeling of, oh my gosh, 2 years went by in a flash. We've all been maybe in a little bit of a haze for the
Yeah.
last 2 years. So women are saying, oh my God, I don't feel like I lived the last 2 years. I just lost 2 years. Like, what's going on? So, can you talk, before we get into the COVID of it all, can you talk a little bit about why do we push against aging so much in the US?
Well, I think part of it is cultural. It's not all cultural, but we have grown up in a time where we value sexiness, which translates to youthfulness.
Mhm,
We define beauty in a very limited way. Beauty has
mhm,
to do with no lines on your skin and a perky booty.
mhm.
um, Women have not been seen as whole people in this culture for a long time. Women were the mothers, they were the teachers, they were the caretakers, all wonderful roles, but still limiting. So as women expand into the world and say, wait, I have a story too that
Yeah.
doesn't involve just that. I have a voice too that doesn't involve just speaking to my husband or to my family. um,
Mhm.
Now what we're seeing, I think that we're living in an exciting time, a time of kind of revolution almost, where women are claiming their voices and they're saying, I am more than this. And I think that's what we want for ourselves. It's what we want for our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought that up because I was just, especially most recently with the passing of Betty White, there's been a lot of discussion about what it meant to be, let's say, 50 back in the 80s, right? In the 1980s versus what it means and how women who were 50 were portrayed on television and in movies,
Right.
and fast forward to where we are now and what a 50-year-old woman looks like now, and just the difference of how women are portrayed in that relatively short span of time, in terms of being a lot more viable, a lot more vibrant now than they would have been years ago. So have we made progress?
I think we have made progress. I think of my mother's life, who really had some shame around aging.
Hmm.
Never tell anyone you're over 39
Hmm.
kind of thing. It was sort of a punchline, but it also sort of wasn't. She really lamented the loss of her youth.
Yeah.
And then we fast forward in my life to a time when still in the 1970s and the 1980s, sexual harassment in the workplace was alive and well and had
Mhm,
everything to do with your looks.
mhm.
And then the Women's March happened in 2017. And
Mm,
what a turning point that was.
mhm.
Because, as an old feminist, I went to that march in my little town of Ashland, Oregon, and most of the town was there. And I saw young women and older women, and I saw husbands and whatnot. The following year, two amazing things happened. One was hashtag Me Too.
Mm.
And the other was that more women over the age of 50 ran for local, state, and national office than ever before in the history of this country,
Wow.
and ever before. So I see that, yes, we have made progress. And yes, we are still looking for a place at the table and a place for our voices to be heard. Um,
Mhm.
I like to point out that a book I read recently, Elizabeth Lesser, Cassandra Speaks, has the most wonderful subtitle in the world, and it says it all for me. When women tell their story, the human story changes. And that's what we are in the process of doing now. That really is the revolution.
Yeah. I love that quote because I love that what the points that you're raising about how we're seeing women over 50, let's say, older than over 50, but women doing things in greater numbers than they were doing before. It's almost like that idea, if you can see it, you can be it. And if you're a woman, younger woman looking out ahead, and you see all these women, you mentioned before, what was it, 2018, that there were significantly more women over the age of 50 who ran for office,
Yes.
whether that was local or national. That's a wonderful stat. I did not know that. I didn't. And I think that's what people have to see in order to understand that there's runway ahead of them, and that there's so much that they can still do.
Well, I think and that's part of what's going on is we're looking at that third act differently. The
Mm,
third act in a play is where the transformation happens. The last
mm,
chapters of the book are where the transformation happens. That's where the
mm.
meat of the story is brought home. And unfortunately, women for a long, long time have lived this life that after motherhood, it's like, well, you're done. You're useless. What are you going to do now?
Right.
So the third act is an exciting time. And I think that women everywhere are beginning to discover that. And
Yeah.
that, age is not the deterrent that it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago.
Hmm.
The idea that I'm too old. Well, perhaps for some things. I'm too old at this point, probably to become a prima ballerina. Although I have a girlfriend my age who is still taking ballet class.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not too old to do the things to find a passion and a purpose for my life. And I think that's part of where the disconnect is. You retire, you turn 50, 10 years later, you retire 15 years later, and you go, now what?
Hmm.
Now what do I do? Okay, I've
Hmm.
got like all these possibilities, but now what?
Yeah.
And so the who am I question that we asked in our 20s, 30s, and 40s is just as relevant as we age, if not more so.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too, and I would love to get your perspective. Why do we have then have such a difficult time still, I think, in this day and age? Why do women seem to still have such a difficult time with the process of aging? It's such a topic of conversation. I recently participated in this event, and the women in the group were sort of saying together, mobilizing, "Don't let age be your cage," which I thought was a very catchy phrase. But the fact that we had to say that, the fact that it had to be said still, what is that? Why do we have such a difficult time with this?
I think part of it is it comes down to mortality
Mm,
and mortality, not just in the sense of age, but mortality in the sense of the things that we let go of.
mhm,
Part of aging is that it is a letting go process. Once you hit menopause, this initiation into the third act,
mhm,
you're not going to have kids anymore. There is a kind of mourning and lamentation that goes on with that
mhm,
for some women.
mhm,
And as you so, you know, deftly pointed out, identity is a big issue. It's like,
mhm,
if I am this, then who am I now? And that's why that question, who am I, becomes so important. But the letting go piece, here's what's interesting about letting go. Um, you let go of certain things, but the universe really abhors a vacuum.
mm,
So now the stance you have to take as an older woman is you have to stand back with your heart open and your hands open and a
mhm,
sense of curiosity and a sense of gratitude. And that's what gets you through the day.
mhm.
Curiosity and gratitude. But that
Yes.
letting go piece, it's not an easy feat for
Mhm,
most of us.
mhm. Yeah. So, what advice would you have for women who are feeling stuck because they feel like they're too old to achieve their life streams?
Well, it would be a platitude to say you're never too old. But I think the unsticking part, getting unstuck, has to do with what you make of your older age. I mean, what is it that older age is teaching us? It teaches us, for one thing, to be more reflective, more
Mhm,
contemplative about our lives.
mhm,
That now, instead of looking toward the light and walking towards that, we are the light holders. We
mhm.
shine a light to those women that are behind us.
Yeah,
There is a great and noble responsibility in that.
yeah.
That should be exciting. That should be purposeful to older women. It's like, don't shirk your responsibility. Hold a light for the women behind you. How do
Mhm,
you do that? You do that by uplifting other women.
yeah,
I can remember living in a work life where I was competitive very often with
mhm,
other women.
Mhm.
Now, at an older age, one of the gifts is I no longer feel that sense of competition.
Right.
I'm secure in myself. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. But what I can do with younger women or the women that stand behind me and the women that are my same age is to lift them up.
Mhm.
I'm in a writing group right now where we critique each other's works once a week. And I
Mhm.
have come to the conclusion that criticism teaches absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
Criticism armors us. And we all want to have this attitude like, yes, give me criticism so I can become better. And I
Hmm.
don't think it works like that. I
Interesting.
think the way that it works is that we communicate with other women, with artists. This is what your work evokes in me.
Mhm.
This is where I was inspired. This
Mhm.
is where I felt uplifted. And that by inspiring and uplifting other women in that way, then they find the path within them that organically unfolds that leads them to their own betterment, whether that's in work or art or anything else.
Mhm.
And I'm going to do some more exploring of that topic because I like the idea that criticism doesn't really teach anything.
Yeah. Well, it's a very provocative thought
Yeah.
because I think we live in a society where we are taught, certainly if you work in any sort of job where you've got to take feedback all the time, right? I can't think of any job where you're not given feedback. So it'd be very interesting to hear more on that. What do you think in terms of a woman who has reached an age, or reached a point, and she feels like she hasn't necessarily achieved what she wants to? We recently did a survey of our community members, and 93% of women told us that they had things that they wanted to improve in their life, and others who said, I think we had 56% of women who told us that if they thought about it, the life that they're living now is not the life that they dreamed of 5 to 10 years ago. So you have like basically a pretty large group of people who are feeling like, maybe their life is not what they expected it to be. And then this huge number of people, this 90 some odd percent, that say that there are things that they want to improve. What would you recommend to those women that were trying to figure out how to determine what their dreams are? I mean, you may feel like, okay, I want to do something different. I know I want to, or I want to feel different than the way I feel right now. But how do you tap into what is it that you want to do? Do you have any advice for women on that?
Well, first of all, I love the camp, the 93% that wanted to improve, because I think that we can grow psychologically and spiritually till the day we die. Um,
Yes.
but what those women that are looking for, how do I come to terms with this not being the life that I envisioned? How do I come to terms with finding purpose and vision? Um, a couple of things. One is don't be afraid to experiment. You don't
Mhm.
have to get it right the first time. There's
Mhm.
no report card at the end of the day. What what did you love as a kid that you might go back and reclaim? Whether that's walking in the woods and I have a place where I walk in the woods right now. And I used to make little altars in the woods when I was a kid. And I was on this path the other day and I saw that somebody had made a mandala with
Mhm.
rocks and twigs. It was very small, but it was so sweet. And it was like, that was something that lit me up. It's like, oh, I remember doing that kind of stuff. I want to do that in the woods. So I think that experimentation is a great thing. And the other thing that I think helps as we grow older is to journal. And the reason that I say journal is that it helps us make sense of the world. It helps us organize our thoughts. It's a place where we can absolutely vent and be our very worst self, and nobody has to read it but us.
Mhm.
And if you journal and you go back and read, you can see a pattern of your own growth. You'll find that the same themes come up again and again. That's a clue as to what you might want to do with the rest of your life with this glorious Act Three.
Mhm.
What's remarkable about you?
Mhm.
Ah, it's such a great question to ask yourself. What's remarkable about me?
Yeah, well, and I love that you're talking about journaling, because one of the things that we also hear from women is that they struggle with self-awareness. how I know that I'm upset. I don't know why I'm upset. I know that I feel dissatisfied. I don't know why I'm dissatisfied. There's this theme of knowing you feel a certain way because we're emotional beings and we understand that we're feeling a certain way, but we don't know why. Is journaling is journaling a way that you would recommend that women could kind of tap into that? Some other practice for self-awareness? Anything that you can share your advice
Well,
on there?
the book that I always recommend for journaling are Julia Cameron's books, The Artist's Way, and
Mhm.
she has a new one out that the name escapes me right now, but it's sort of about the blend of the spiritual life and the psychological life.
Mm,
And I just think that writing down your thoughts helps to make sense of the world. We don't always know. You wake up pissy, you don't always know why.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so writing, and especially a regular time of writing and a regular writing, make a ceremony out of it. By nature, we are ritualistic beings.
mm,
Most of us have grandparents that came to this country as immigrants, grandparents
mhm,
or great grandparents.
mhm,
And what those women brought with them at a time before there was television, at a time before there was the internet, at a time when many of them were not literate, was they brought the teachings of an old world that contained something that was grounded in the earth, something that was
mhm,
grounded in the cosmos. So
mhm,
in our lineage, each one of us has a woman, an ancestor who is a healer, who knew
mhm,
about the herbs, who knew about the traditions of the country and the origin stories. And I think that guided imagery within ourselves to tap into our ancestral line as to who those women were, I
mhm.
think that's valuable stuff
Yeah.
to write about it as if that woman was speaking to you and as if you were speaking to her,
Mhm.
that we can still learn from our ancestors, that
Yes.
we can stand in the center of a room. I do this sometimes and I close my eyes and I just imagine my mother standing behind me.
Yeah.
And then behind my mother is my grandmother, Julia, who I was very close with. And behind
Mhm.
her is my great grandmother, Eva, who I never met except on the day I scattered my mother's ashes. And then I met her.
Mm,
And, there's like this whole lineage then that goes on, nameless, faceless women that
mhm,
paved a way and paid a price for us.
mhm, mhm.
So I think that's a way to tap into where you came from, because where we came from, there's magic in that lineage for all of us.
Let's talk a little bit about your latest book,
Okay.
Creatrix Rising: Unlocking the Power of Midlife Women. What inspired you to write the book?
Well, I had grown interested in the paradigm that the late poet and playwright Robert Graves put forth, which was maiden, mother, crone. And I thought, God, there's really this huge gap between mother and crone. And as I dug into the word crone, the etymology of the word crone is 16th, I think it's 16th century, or maybe 6th century Old French, and it comes from the word carrion, which is the rotting flesh of animals. So
Mm,
crone was meant as an insult. It was not
mhm,
meant as a designation. It was
mhm,
meant as an insult. Oh, she's a crone. It means useless, used up woman. And so, to me, as a writer, words matter. So I
yeah,
didn't like the word crone. And I thought, what really happens after motherhood is that third act.
yeah.
Menopause is the bridge into that third act. So then what is the archetype then that's emerging now? And my editor suggested the word to me, creatrix. And to me, it sounded like creative. So I
Mhm.
thought, oh, that's a great word. And
Yep.
I thought she'd made it up, but turns out it's a real word. And it comes from the three Greek fates. There was the spinner, the weaver, and the cutter. And the weaver was the creatrix. And it is a feminine word uniquely. And it is a word that means a woman who makes things. And
Mhm.
that's who we are now. We
Yeah,
are women who make things.
yeah.
So that's where the whole idea, and the idea that we are changing, that we're on the cutting edge of this revolution, that the human story is changing because of the stories we are telling now.
Mhm.
That's where the whole idea of Creatrix Rising, unlocking the power of midlife women, comes from.
I love that. I love that. And I in the book, I know that there is You wrote the book partially during COVID,
Yeah.
correct? How did that influence what?
I felt like a prisoner in my house, which I think, women are such social creatures. We naturally come together in community.
Mhm.
So it was like for almost 2 years, seeing and being with women only on a screen, there was like always this veil between us. Um, but the book was influenced, and the epilogue to the book is unusual in that regard, is that I did what mythologists do. And that
Mm,
is, I made a mythology out of creatrix. I gave her a consciousness and I gave her an intent.
mm,
And it's like, what is this? Creatrix, the COVID as a mythologized as a woman, holds a light too,
mhm,
but it's not the light of illumination. It's an interrogation light, and it
mm.
reveals to us all the broken places in our society. And I
Wow.
think that's a lot of what we've dealt with for the last couple years, that women can see the cracks in the culture from this light that this virus has held up to us. And
Yeah.
we are being called to make change, to make good, to make beauty in our world through our sense of purposefulness and our sense of intention.
Yeah. What a wonderful way to think about what's happened over the last couple of years. It's a very different approach that I've heard before, but this idea that COVID has been a light, but not necessarily a light of in a positive way, a light that's more of the interrogation light, as you said, and one that helps us identify where there are issues. And if you think about it, so much has changed for women over the last 2 years, right? The number of women who've left the workforce because of the circumstances behind COVID, whether that's because they lost their jobs or because they had childcare issues. But there has been a huge shift, I think, in how women are thinking because of the last 2 years. So I love that idea that we should be thinking differently. That although COVID has brought with it a lot of negativity, it also has this opportunity to give us some insight into things that we should be looking at our society and changing. What do you think is important? Why do you think it's important for women to embrace their journey and their own experiences?
Well, we learn from ourselves. You know, I sometimes teach an online class in the power of knowing your personal feminist history.
Mm,
Because our tendency is we look at feminism and we go, oh, well, that's a history that happened out there and it involved, Candy Stanton and all these people and Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. But actually, feminism, that history happens within our very own families. And
mhm,
we all have the story of, the mother who said, don't let anybody hold you back from your art. Or the grandmother that wore pants on the farm at a time when women were not wearing pants. That just wasn't, something a woman was supposed to do.
mhm.
So there is power in knowing our own story.
Yes.
And I think that that's what's important about this time. It brings full circle the whole idea of journaling, of telling your story, of finding opportunities within your world to share your story with women.
Mhm,
We are always stronger in unison. We are
mhm,
always stronger as a group together.
mhm.
And it's not just your life and my life, it's the community of how we share with women our story and vision and purpose. And we therefore lift each other up.
Are there any daily practices that women can use to start embracing their age and tapping into their creativity?
Well, I think thank you is a good place to start.
Mm,
The fact that you're above ground at this age,
yes.
say thank you. The fact that you get to watch your grandkids grow, that's a good place to start, is with gratitude.
Yes.
And it is a deeper, richer gratitude than Oh my God, I'm so glad I got that Botox. And believe me, and I'm not anti-Botox, but
Mhm.
it's a different texture.
Yeah.
You give thanks for where I am right now in my life. That's a good place to start
Yeah.
as a daily practice. I think curiosity is a
Mm,
great place in daily living. What can I learn today?
mm,
My word for 2022 is student. When
mhm.
my heart is full of gratitude and my mind is full of curiosity, I'm a happy camper.
I love that.
So curiosity, those are the two things I would say as a daily practice.
I love what you just said, a heart full of gratitude and a mind full of curiosity.
Yep.
It's a powerful combination.
And it's a happy place.
Yeah. Yeah. These are things, these are definitely things that we have heard from people in the past, but I think the context of how you're saying them and also the recognition that we are above ground, as you said, and even just the odds that we're here to begin with, right? The
Exactly.
fact that we were born, it's these are things that we don't think of. And I think if I am hearing a theme in what you've been telling me as we've been talking, I feel like the theme is take a step back and think about the history of how you got here, what happened before you, put it into context. And we often don't do that. We
Right.
are so often focused on the very here and now that we don't put things into that context. And when you put it into the context, you get a very different picture.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And as you were saying that, my mind was working. I was getting images of that long line of women behind us,
Hmm.
or the circle of women that we stand in now as we go through these changes culturally and we inspire each other and lift each other up. Um, Life is good. Life is meant to be celebrated, and it's meant to be celebrated at every age. Aging is a remarkable and noble passage.
Hmm.
And the fact that you're now at the front of the line and you can hold a light for someone else, that's only feel good stuff to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that. What if people want to follow your work? You have other books you've written as well. What is the best way for people to follow you and continue to hear your wonderful insights?
Come to my website, which is byline-stephanie.com. And on my website, I have where you can get my books. I do weekly blogs, sign up for my newsletter. You can follow me on social media. All my social media handles are also on my website, probably on your show notes page too.
Mhm.
So that's a good way to follow me. And I do have an email address that is on my website, and I answer emails. I love to engage with other women and hear about what they're doing and how they're doing it in the world and cheer them on.
Stephanie, thank you so much. I really feel like I learned something and I have a different perspective from talking with you. And I am excited for people to hear our conversation because I think they will also have a chance to walk away thinking differently about things. So, for that, I am so grateful. And you've made the time to talk to us. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great. Great conversation with you. I appreciate it.